Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Welcome, everyone. This is Ash Sadiq, the host of the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast. My guest today is Jeff Loucks. Is this the right way to say it, Jeff? The last name?
Locke.
Loucks.
Locke. Yes, that's right.
Loucks. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. This is Ash Sadiq, the host of the Top 1% Sellers Factory. My guest today is Jeff Loucks, and I'm actually going to give Jeff a chance to introduce himself before we delve deeper into our conversation. Jeff.
Yes, as Ash mentioned, my name is Jeff Loucks. I am a director with Cisco's Digitization Office, and our office is dedicated to helping to transform Cisco as we move from a company that formerly sold discrete products to one that sells products, services, and solutions in an integrated way, and increasingly through consumption-based pricing models. So this is a very big change for Cisco, and it's one I'm privileged to be part of. I also wear another hat, and that is as a researcher, and in fact, a senior research fellow with the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. And this is an initiative between Cisco and the Swiss Business School, IMD, the Institute for Management Development in Switzerland. And the research we're going to be sharing today is the result of the first year's outcome of that research, our book, Digital Vortex.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff, for being here. And definitely, I've been enjoying reading the book. As I mentioned to you, I've shared with a few other, some of my contacts in high tech. And just to our audience, we'll actually have this conversation as a three-part series. The first part I'm going to focus on with Jeff is what's really happening, what was the catalyst behind his latest book, Digital Vortex, with the subject line, how today's market leaders can beat disruptive competitors at their own game. We're going to delve into, what was the catalyst behind the research, Jeff, and then if you kind of take us through some of the key steps that you've taken in the research, and then also, what are the key outcomes that you've seen coming out of it.
Great. Well, the catalyst for the research is that we had heard an awful lot about digital disruption. And in fact, sometimes when you open up the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, it almost reads like Wired magazine. There's just so much talk about disruption and so many profiles of how companies are trying to fight it by integrating technology into their business models. But there is also a fair amount of skepticism that disruption is just a buzzword and yet another word that people can ignore after hearing for a while. And so we wanted to have a closer look at determining whether digital disruption is real, and if so, what effect it's going to have on companies, and how companies need to change in order to fight it. So we undertook what I think is the largest single research project on the topic anywhere to date. And it consisted of several parts, the first of which was a quantitative survey of 941 senior business leaders across the globe. But we also wanted to get the perspective of the disruptors themselves. And so we had in-depth discussions with dozens of startup founders and senior executives, usually spent about an hour talking with them and understanding why they've gone after the markets they have and the effects that they've had thus far. And we also conducted an analysis of the business models of the top 100 digital disruptors to understand the mechanics of how and why disruption occurs. And then finally, as part of our discovery days in Lausanne, Switzerland at the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation, we would share our research with workshops and events. And we talked with about 1,000 executives from leading companies all over the world to get an understanding of whether they're seeing what we are in the market, and also understand their challenges and approaches in dealing with digital transformation and disruption.
That's fascinating, and I'm glad that you had such a platform at IMD to really have these conversations, because that gives you a global set of audience versus just sort of working with, let's say, like companies in the US, but you had a nice global mix of people. Was that the case?
It was, and in fact, the partnership with IMD has been really instrumental in giving our research that extra quality and credibility. Our partner, who's the director, Mike Wade, and his staff have been really good. And of course, I also had other people within Cisco who wrote this book with me who are also members of the center, Andy Nerona and James McCauley. And so this was a real group effort.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And let's take a look then at, some of the key findings that you've seen across the board coming through those conversations.
Our findings were very startling in terms of the degree to which executives expect disruption to occur in their own industries. 4 out of 10 market incumbents, according to our survey, are going to be displaced by digital disruption in the next 5 years. And so what we're talking about here is among the top 10 market leaders in each of the industries we studied, an average of 4 out of the 10 are going to be displaced. Now, this can occur from simply losing battles. It can also occur, in my view, through defensive mergers, where companies understand that they're kind of outflanked and they're acquiring others in order to try to compete more effectively or gain more size. And so you're seeing both of those in the market right now.
Yes.
But when it comes to the time to disruption, our initial question had to do with, how many are going to be displaced in 5 years? But then we asked a second question saying, how long do you think it's going to be before you really start seeing this in the market, before there's significant disruption? Yes. And they said it was going to be about 3 years to significant disruption. So there's really no time to waste. But another important finding for us is that it's not just going to be the players at the top who are affected.
Yes.
41% of the executives that we surveyed said that they believe digital disruption is an existential threat for their own companies, whether they're at the top or smaller. Yes. And so this is going to be very pervasive.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I was surprised in the book, one of the charts actually said that a big number of those people in the research, it wasn't really clear that they had intention to, I see here that it was not really a board level discussion for them, which was astounding for me. That's 45% of that crowd was not really talking about digital transformation at that board level.
That's right. That's something I think that's changing a little bit. But for so many companies and executives, they're so worried about running their business and trying to make their quarterly numbers that something like this is not on the radar, or if it is, they're not really trying to deal with it. And in fact, we found that only 25% of companies are actively responding to the threat of digital disruption, despite the fact that the stakes are so high. We have a lot of people who, as you mentioned, are kind of sticking their head in the sand. They're not responding appropriately to it at all. And then a lot of people also are trying to have a fast follower approach, where they're going to see where the market goes, and then they're going to jump in with both feet once they get more of an indication. But the problem is that in digital disruption, so often you're seeing that there's one winner or one or two winners. And a fast follower approach really isn't going to work in this market, or at the very least, it's extremely risky.
So you're saying that the best thing would be typically to sort of like lead the way?
In this case, you really need to lead the way in figuring out how to add more value for your customers, to do so using digital technologies and business models.
Yes.
And when in doubt, to be able to disrupt yourself without prematurely abandoning your core business. And we can talk about the strategy that you need to employ in the digital vortex in a little bit.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Fantastic, Jeff. And when you take a look at the mix of those key findings, did you see that people in certain industries were faring much better off than others when it comes to digital transformation?
The ones that were feeling most secure were industries like pharmaceuticals and oil and gas and utilities, where we haven't seen a lot of disruption yet, and mostly because those are primarily B2B industries. Whereas the industries that have felt the heat most, like retail and media, increasingly financial services, and then of course technology, there's a lot of business to consumer there, and many of the initial attempts at disruption have focused on consumers.
Yes.
So what we're seeing now is that every industry is more or less vulnerable, and that even the ones who are less vulnerable are only really one disruptor away from being in the center of what we call the digital vortex.
Yes. Reminds me also how I think in recent years we've seen a lot of companies sort of start having a chief innovation officer as part of the company. Was that part of an initial indication that they are realizing the importance of what's happening and the fact that they need to sort of lead the way in that direction? Were some of the companies that you talked to already having that as part of the language within the company, that they have to have a central responsibility center for how they are looking at this digital disruption, perhaps, or even innovation in general?
We have seen companies attack this in various ways. Some of them have a chief innovation officer. Increasingly, they have a chief digital officer. But really what matters most is not whether they have someone in roles like that, but what the role really entails. And so, for instance, at Cisco, our chief digital officer, Kevin Bandy, has a very wide remit to help reimagine the value that Cisco creates for its customers and the ways we change our operations in order to add that value. Whereas in many other companies, the chief digital officer ends up being more of kind of a marketing role or has a more limited mandate.
Yes.
And you see that, I think, the same thing with innovation initiatives. In many companies, they are mimicking what disruptors do. So they might have, an innovation lab, or they might have a center of excellence that isn't really driving the rest of the business, but is kind of a sideshow.
Yes.
And so the real question is, are these officers, are these executives really driving the business, and do they have a wide mandate, or are they off to the side?
That makes a lot of sense. Wonderful, Jeff. So we'll close out this portion of our conversation, and we're just going to take a pause here, Jeff, and go into a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and take a look at the why behind digital disruption. So we'll be right back.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome back, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here. We're now going to take another look at the Digital Vortex, the book that you've written with a number of other authors in collaboration with IMD, and really look at the whole concept of why should companies, executives around the world really care about digital disruption? Why should they?
Well, that is an excellent question. And to me, the idea of dealing with and even recognizing digital disruption, it means that you've got to do something about it. And we talked earlier about the fact that some executives have tried to resist that conclusion, but increasingly it's becoming very clear.
Yes.
And one of our survey questions really helped to bring this into light. So we asked our 941 senior executives, what are the advantages that disruptors have versus big companies or companies that have been around for a long time?
Yes.
And then what are your advantages as established market leaders? And they said the advantages of disruptors are that they innovate faster and better. They move with more agility, so they can spot opportunities and threats more quickly and respond to them. And they also reward a culture of experimentation and risk. They said, on the other hand, we have some real advantages ourselves.
Yes.
We have a lot of access to capital. We have big brands, sometimes multi-billion-dollar brands. And then, of course, because we're the big players, we have lots and lots of customers. That's what makes us the market leaders. But as we can see, these advantages are eroding very quickly. So when we talk about access to capital, there are over 170 unicorns, which used to be very rare, hence the name.
Yes.
They're private companies with $1 billion or more valuation. So that's lots of capital flowing into these companies that are challenging the market leaders.
Yes.
In terms of brand, you're seeing Airbnb and all sorts of other big brands that are on everybody's lips. And when it comes to customers, you think about someone like Alipay in China. The main mobile payments platform has over 450 million users. And by contrast, in the US, the biggest mobile banking app, let's say, is JP Morgan Chase. They've got 25 million users. So some of these disruptors are scaling at nearly unheard of rates. And so this is what's changing, is that it's clear that the landscape has changed. Big companies need the innovation and agility of the startups and disruptors, but the disruptors are already gaining on the advantages of the big companies.
Yes, yes, and as you mentioned in the book, that creates the I think you talk about value vampires and value vacancies. If you can talk a bit to that, I think that's sort of relevant to what you just talked about.
Absolutely. So when we take a look at how things have changed in what we call the digital vortex, one of the things is that the nature of competition has changed. You have disruptors who are able to use lower cost as well as having a better experience. And they're able to bring this to light through what we call platform value.
Yes.
Using technology, using the ability to connect buyers and sellers, create multi-sided markets, what have you. They're able to combine all of these things in ways that the typical incumbent can't match, but that give them a lot of advantage in terms of the offerings they can produce.
Yes.
And one of those big advantages is cost. So we'll take an example from the service provider industry.
Yes.
A typical value vampire is the example of WhatsApp. WhatsApp was able to come into a market, the global short message service market, text messaging.
Exactly.
And this area was growing like crazy. They come along with their free app, and suddenly everybody's using WhatsApp. And global service provider revenue ended up shrinking like crazy. And in fact, it's going to go from 120 billion globally in 2013 to 97 billion in 2018. So you're seeing markets like this shrink like crazy, in addition to the loss that has already occurred.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I like what you just started talking about. I'd love for people to kind of hear from you those three different types of value, and how when you think about digital disruption, how can companies then think about, I think you speak about cost value, experience value, and platform value. Very intriguing model, and I think our listeners would really appreciate if you can give them examples. I like what you just said about WhatsApp, because I think that was a fantastic example. If we can maybe define each one of those values for them, and hopefully also kind of back into a few examples.
Absolutely. So one of the things disruptors do that the typical company doesn't do as well is focus very strongly on the value that they add to the customer. In many cases, they're coming into markets without very, very much in the way of customers. And so they need to have a very clear value proposition and a compelling value proposition.
Yes.
And the ways that they have gone about this are by creating three types of value. And when we took a look at the business models of the 100 most disruptive companies, what we realized is that for all their differences, their different verticals, their different technologies they're using, they really focus on three types of value. And the first is cost value. And that can be providing something completely free, where you're making your money somewhere else, or it can be, very low cost, or you only charge what they consume and they don't have to pay for the rest. Then there's experience value. And experience value means things like reducing friction in the ability to obtain a service or a product. So it's just easier to get.
Yes.
It's customized to you and what you want. And again, this ability for the customer to choose exactly what they want and to eliminate what they don't. But companies have been competing on cost value and experience value for a very long time. Platform value is what is new. And this is, I think, new to digital disruption. And it is the glue, I think, that holds a lot of these value propositions together.
Yes.
So platform value is the ability to use technology, network communications, and so forth to do things like link buyers and sellers the way an Uber does, or to be able to use the Internet of Things to create new types of data and to orchestrate data services.
Yes.
And it's really the ability to bring things together in new and exciting ways that can often drive cost value and experience value.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I remember you also talking in the book about it's not the value chain, it's the value creation itself. And I think that's intriguing. A lot of people sort of who studied Michael Porter looked at the whole value chain model, and now you're basically saying it is not as much the value chain, but it's actually the value that you create. If you can talk to the audience about that, that's interesting.
Absolutely. So what we say in the book is it's the value that the disruptor creates for the customer, not the value chain that is typically used to produce that.
Yes.
So an example would be in financial services. You have these robo-advisors like Betterment and Wealthfront that are displacing companies that have traditionally relied upon high-cost, highly paid human advisors.
Yes.
And so a Wealthfront will, it's an online and mobile service that uses algorithms to understand the investment objectives and risk level of the investor, to select investments, and then to manage those automatically. So they have the cost value in terms of being much lower cost, 0.25% of assets under management versus 1 or 1.25 or 2%.
Yes.
The experience value is, it's automated. It's just for you. Your own circumstances, your own investment goals, and it just keeps working in the background.
Yes.
And then it uses platform value because it has a very scalable web-based and online platform. It uses algorithms. And when you compare that to the way that a typical advisor or even a mutual fund company would do it, they charge more. In the case of mutual funds, it's much less personalized,
Yes.
and the outcomes aren't as good. Or a human advisor, what we found in one study after another, this is not our research, but you're seeing it in the market, is that exchange-traded funds and the things that a Wealthfront uses actually outperform human advisors. So it's lower cost and it's better. And this is what we call combinatorial disruption, when you're combining cost value, experience value, and platform value, and you're doing it in a way that innovates past the boundaries of the usual value chain.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for that. And I'd love to. You do talk about 15 different business models that digital disruption kind of happens through, and I know we don't have time to kind of delve deeper into each one of them, but I'm wondering if you've seen any commonalities in these digital models that other people listening in may really kind of take note and start talking with their leadership teams about.
Well, in the book, we talk about there are 5 business models under cost value, experience value, and platform value that we spell out and we talk about. And what these business models can help a company do, whether you're a disruptor or a startup and you're trying to figure out, how do I become a strong disruptor? Or if you're an established company, you say, well, how can I drive combinatorial disruption myself?
Yes.
Is that you can use these business models and combine them. So, pick a cost value model like, ultra low cost.
Yes.
An experience value like reduced friction. And then a platform value of being able to use data and data analytics.
Yes.
That's what Wealthfront does, has combined essentially these 3 types.
Yes.
And then they've constructed a business model based on them. So these are almost your ingredients for becoming a disruptor.
Yes. I am actually curious then, based on what you just said and the Digital Innovation Center that you built with IMD, do you think companies like McKinsey and Bain and others have sort of caught up to that thought process? Because if you look at, what the Boston Consulting Group has done and others, a lot of the models, I don't think they've caught up to what you just talked about.
Well, the work that we're doing, I think, is very unique in the market right now. And in fact, part of what we tried to do at the outset is to be very clear in our definitions of what digital meant and disruption and transformation. Yes. And I think that you can look at something from McKinsey or BCG and go an entire article without being really clear about what they're talking about when it comes to what digital or disruption means, and also the ways that they describe these business models often are not as clear. And so we've really tried to establish our definitions and clarity, because without that, I don't think companies and executives can move forward.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And do then maybe just a quick coverage for the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. How does that center work? If we can maybe share with the audience, is that a destination that companies can go to and get help?
It is more of a research center right now than a place where we're set up on a large scale to work with companies, although that's a way that we could potentially evolve in the future. Right now, it is a research institute connected with IMD and with Cisco. But IMD is a great partner for us because they have thousands of executives coming through every year. And they also have academic programs focused on executives that kind of dive deeper into this. But as of right now, the center is not a place where we are working in a lab sort of setting with customers. But what we are doing is we're sharing our research with customers, and we're talking these through. So it's a way that companies can come to understand what we're researching and participating in that research in terms of providing feedback and also telling us what they're doing. And that aspect of things has been really important for us to understand from senior executives what they're doing in their own companies. Has been very enlightening for us.
Wonderful, wonderful, Jeff. I want to recap this portion. We've been speaking with Jeff Loucks. He's one of the authors of Digital Vortex, How Today's Market Leaders Can Beat Disruptive Competitors at Their Own Game. We're going to go on a commercial break and come right back and talk with Jeff about how sales professionals, whether they are working in services, sales, or the channel, can really leverage a lot of the insights in the Digital Vortex book, and also how to engage with the customers in these conversations. We'll be right back. Perfect, Jeff. Welcome back. So as you and I talked, this last portion of our conversation is really going to focus more on the sales professionals that are working in today's markets, whether they are working in high tech or other companies that are essentially helping companies really transform how they are conducting business and leveraging the whole digital disruption space. Let's sort of start thinking about the insights that sales professional needs to bring to the conversation, and how you believe these conversations need to be architected from the get-go. And in order to do so, where do you think the sales conversation fits in how companies need to understand the value behind digital transformation?
Well, I think that what sales professionals need to focus on is probably the second half of the book, where we talk about digital business agility. And this is the capability that all companies need in order to compete more effectively in the digital vortex. So digital business agility is essentially what disruptors are able to do with their own capabilities and processes that bigger companies aren't able to do. And it has three major components. I'll go through these quickly, and I'll talk a bit about why this should be the focus of a lot of the sales conversation.
Fantastic.
So the first is hyperawareness. And this is the ability to use technology to detect and monitor changes in a company's business environment. And that could be new technology trends, new competitors, and it could also be what your customers want and value, or what your employees know that is of value to you as you change your strategy and as you adapt. So hyperawareness is the ability to collect the information that matters and to be able to essentially know what you need to know. But then with that information, you have to move to the second step, which is informed decision making. And that's a company's ability to make the best decision possible in a given situation. And this entails two real areas of focus. One of them is to bring human expertise to bear on a situation. So finding experts within your organization, bringing the right executives together to make a decision. But the second part of it is to be able to augment human expertise and wisdom with the most accurate data, the best scenario planning, the best machine learning capabilities, so that you're not just reacting to what happened, but you're starting to be able to predict the future. So that's hyperawareness, collecting the information, using that to make an informed decision, and then finally you move to the third phase, which is fast execution. And that's a company's ability to carry out its plans quickly and effectively. And this can mean, occasionally let's say you've made a decision and you need new human resources, or to be able to bring new expertise into your company. Or you may need a new technology capability that you haven't had before to automate a process. These are all things that you need to deal with in fast execution. But when a company has all three working together, they're going to be much more effective at innovating, at executing on that innovation, and being able to find new markets.
Yeah, that's terrific, Jeff. I actually, as you were talking, and like you mentioned, at least sort of the HR area, because when sales professionals are speaking to some of these companies, sometimes what we're talking about is not a complete transformation of the business as a whole. Sometimes it's a specific function within that business that really requires that digital disruption to happen, which will eventually also result in other parts of the business innovating and disrupting how they do business. Which kind of leads me to ask, when you look at that body of companies that you spoke with, some of them are perhaps doing some of those things inside these companies much better than others. Has that been the case? Have you seen examples of where innovations is happening within the company in certain parts of the company? And how do they go about doing it? And how does the seller then sort of use that as sort of use cases for the conversation?
Well, you make a very good point. Often you're going to be talking to different business unit owners or parts of the business, and they're not going to be able to affect their company's entire digital transformation strategy, but you can help their organization to become more hyper aware, make better decisions, and execute more quickly. And so I think in terms of sales professionals, you want to start moving the conversation away from speeds and feeds or whatever it is that your product does better. And you want to start talking about how it can help the company's business leader, whoever you're talking to run their business better, to have better digital business agility. And in many cases, the improvements that they can drive can actually make the entire company better, or they can end up affecting the entire strategy of the company.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And when you believe that, in terms of the use cases that perhaps your research has uncovered, how important use cases are going to be for that sales conversation in your mind?
I think that they are very important. And, when it comes to hyperawareness, informed decision making, and fast execution, in the book we have lots of them. But I can give you a couple of quick examples from our recent research. So when you think about hyperawareness and this ability to understand what your customer wants and needs, a really good example of that is Under Armour, the fitness clothing company.
Yes.
So they wanted to have a better understanding of what their customers wanted, because they're trying to stand out in a very crowded sports apparel market where the product is essentially a commodity.
Yes.
And the way they went about this was they ended up spending nearly $710 million on mobile fitness applications. And so they said, we're really going to understand not just what our customers want, but what they're doing and how they're moving. And they were able to get, millions and millions of fitness customers who are logging billions of workouts a year.
Yes.
And what they understood was that these people wanted to get better at, let's say, running or weightlifting, or maybe just healthier. And they were using these apps to do that. And so Under Armour has created an entire business called their Connected Fitness business around helping these people. So they're embedding sensors in apparel and shoes and accessories like Fitbits and even scales.
Yes.
And they've also created some of their own fitness applications like UA Record that captures data all in one place. And what this has allowed Under Armour to do, because they're hyper aware of their customers, and then they're using informed decision making, they've partnered with IBM to help do analysis around this data. They're actually able to give their customers fitness coaching. And so they've moved up the stack from being someone who just sells shorts and shirts to someone who is going to help them to attain their goals. And that is what we're talking about when it comes to using digital disruption to create new business opportunities for yourself.
That's phenomenal. I love the example. Thank you for sharing it. That is definitely amazing. In the book, you've got the digital disruption diagnostic, and I think for sales professionals, it always sometimes helps to have in their own mind, to your point, something that helps them assess where their customers are at. I'd love for you to share, what went behind the creation of the diagnostic, what it entails, and how perhaps it can be used in the sales process.
Absolutely. So what we have at the end of the book are several essentially sets of questions that you can walk your customer through to get them to understand where they are right now in terms of their hyper awareness capabilities, or where they are with their business model change.
Yes.
And to be able to ask them sets of questions that's going to give both them and you as a sales professional more insight about where they need to move. And then you can tailor whatever your solution is to helping them to attain those goals or make that next step. So it's a way of assessing where they are right now,
Yes.
what their needs are, and then you can apply that yourself to how your organization can help them.
That's fantastic. I love the fact that you and the team of the research team and the authors have thought of giving your readers a tool that they can use to do that, and I think it will be very beneficial for sales professionals. What would you say to a sales professional saying, you know what, Jeff and Ash, I think this is fantastic, but this is a long-term play. It's going to take me a long time to talk to customers about something that might take years for them to do, but I've got a sales quota to achieve. How do we respond to that?
Well, I think the way to respond to that is that this is increasingly the way, like the lens of digital disruption and becoming more competitive in the face of it is going to be increasingly what they're going to ask of you and your company. So it's going to be less a matter of, do I have to have this conversation than how am I going to do well at this conversation when it comes up, because it is going to be coming up if it hasn't already. And if they're not talking to you about it, they're talking to your competitor about it, and you're going to be frozen out of these strategic conversations that are going to ultimately yield a lot more in terms of sales. And you're going to miss the chance to be the trusted advisor to companies when they really need it, and they are feeling the need right now.
Yes. Very good point. And I think to your point, when you think about a lot of the insights in the research in the book and what you shared with us today, it really reminds me of the whole concept of CIO, CXO relevance, that by understanding these dynamics and these strategies, what the salesperson is going to be talking about is a whole lot more strategic than coming and talking about a point solution. Isn't that the case?
Oh, definitely. And also, I think that, if you're selling technology products and services, increasingly you're going to be talking to a CIO who is under pressure to start delivering business outcomes. And so they want to have the conversation about how what you can offer them is going to help them to increase the business capabilities of the line of business leaders that they're talking with. And I believe that more and more CIOs and chief digital officers as well, they're going to be working together to get the technology and the business strategy right. And the CIO and people who are in IT management, this is a really important opportunity for them to be able to move up the stack and really help their companies in ways that, the business leaders, they know what they need to achieve, but they're not technology experts, and they need someone to help bridge the gap. And as a sales professional, I think you can help your technical buying centers to do that.
Very, very good point. And one of the things that we've been able to develop at the Top 1% Sellers Factory is an X as a service sales enablement model. And as you're talking, and specifically also about the digital vortex and digital disruption, a lot of companies now are consuming technology in a whole different way. And I think a lot of what we covered today is very relevant in this regard. How do you advise sellers who are in that space now and really helping companies sort of make that shift from on-premise to hybrid to X as a service? How can some of the ideas in the research and the book help that in that conversation?
Well, part of this has to do with what Cisco ourselves are doing. We're moving toward more choice in how customers can consume our technology. And really, it is about choice. A company is going to be able to transform itself better and more effectively when it has the ability to choose how it consumes the technology. There are going to be times when on-premise works best, and there are going to be times when cloud enablement works best. But ultimately, it's a matter of how you can end up delivering the business outcome they need as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think service-based and consumption-based models are a great way to help them to do that.
Yes.
It can be a really big part of fast execution, for instance, because you might be able to very quickly provide a capability, let's say a technology capability that a company needs in order to execute a decision. And you can sometimes do that faster through, let's say, cloud-based solutions.
Yes, very good point. I'd like to close out on something that will even be a lot more exciting for sellers listening in. I think a lot of the ideas you share in the book would really help a seller broaden the scope of their sales conversation, as well as also increase the wallet share of the revenue portion that they get from a particular customer. If you were to sort of summarize to a sales professional how they can prep in order to broaden that footprint of the conversation as well as the wallet share, and we'll close on that question.
Well, I think that the book is an excellent way of getting your customer to understand how and why they're being disrupted.
Yes.
The capability that they need, digital business agility, in order to respond, and then to use some of these tools to walk them through how they need to change and how you can help them. So that is how I would work through it. Is first of all, read through the book and understand each element.
Yes.
And then to use the tools at the end to start saying, well, how am I going to lead my customer through this conversation? And then how can I help? And so which piece of this can I help to add value with myself?
Yes.
And attack for them so that they're really ready. But you have to prep them for the conversation first, and that's why you have to understand how digital disruption works. And then you step in and say, well, here's how you need to change, and then finally, here's how I can help you affect that change.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Jeff. I absolutely agree with you, and I think also it enlightens that sales professional to look across and see what the partners that work with him or her can bring to the table, and then how do you sort of cascade that evolution and help the customer understand how that they can go about doing it. It's been a fantastic conversation, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing the insights and also the value that's in the book itself and the research that you have done. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Ash, thank you for the opportunity to talk. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is again the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast. Would love to get your feedback and definitely check out some of the references that we will be including in the show notes. Thank you for being here. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.